back again, streaming some Rust coding and Direct3D. In the meantime, I was just trying to tidy up a few things with the texture loading. So let me just boot into here. I managed to get a cube map working, which was kind of a bit more similar to what I was doing yesterday. It just requires adding, or maybe I'll go into the code. So what is it called? Upload texture data. No. What was it called? Here it is. Here it is. That upload texture data. So it adds this extra loop which loops over the number of array levels, which gets then passed into the sub resource. So the sub, I did mention yesterday, I wasn't sure about how to work out the sub resource of a MIP or an array level or an array layer. The way to do it is that, say, in a texture with 10 MIP maps, like for instance, there was a cube map, which I set up a sample and I got the cube map working. So it's here. There's a cube map, and then this is rendering a sphere with the various MIP levels. So the sub resource is 0 to 10 is the first face of the cube map. So if it's got 10 MIP levels, 0 is the top level MIP, and then downsampling the MIP chain, and then 11 to 20 is the second face in the MIP chain, and so on and so forth. So that the same applies to texture 2D arrays. So texture 2D arrays are the same as a cube map is a texture array with 6 layers basically. So here is the cube map, got these blurry ones, like I mentioned in the last stream. It's called B image, the texture C texture converter from BGFX. The guy's called Branimir, I think. There's loads of good stuff in there, in BGFX and in his other repos. So if you're wondering how to get this, which is quite nice, and that could be nice for like an image based lighting convolution. There are also like GGX distribution convolution in there, so that's kind of something else I haven't really looked at yet. And I've got this in a render doc because I was debugging it. I think maybe, oh, the capture was taken when I didn't have a, I got the first face working, but here are the MIPs, and you can see they downsample pretty nicely. So that's cube map working, and I made a sample. I might improve that actually. These, you know, make it kind of a bit more reflective and cube mappy, but this was just to test the cube map actually works. So then I started trying to get texture 2D array working. I actually made this cylindrical billboard, which is I'm going to use to sample a texture 2D array and kind of animate it. And it was the little bear texture that I was using the other day. It's a sort of image sequence my friend had made that I just sort of use. Could do with getting some more test data. If you have friends who are good artists, steal all their work and use it. It's always good to have good assets, and I don't really have that many. My cat is meowing. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's supposed to be getting fed in 25 minutes yet, so he's gonna be meowing until then. We'll see if he'll come and visit. So yeah, I've set up this texture 2D test, and I've actually loaded the texture. So I've got the texture 2D array to work, which is the same kind of almost the same code as the cube map. It's just that you use a shader resource view of a texture 2D array, and you use a shader resource view of a cube map depending on the format. So That's the thing that differs. The actual storage is texture 2D arrays. So I just want to get that applied onto here, and that's going to require me adding a new function to the render code. So in order to do the cube map, this is getting a bit messy now, like this lib file. It's got tons of different render function combinations for the tests. I might look at about organizing that a little bit better, and do some documentation so it's kind of clearer what's happening. And then eventually there'll be some more core functionality where the material system and the draw call system will be a bit more nailed down and a bit more generic. So I actually need texture 2D array needs to render meshes renders a spherical billboard. So I'm going to essentially copy this function, and we just want single query. So one single query, which is things that have a world matrix, a mesh component, and a cylindrical billboard. Render texture 2D array animated. So in case you were wondering, a texture 2D array is a texture type, which is kind of like a 3D texture, really. It's a texture with slices that are all the same size, and you can index into it. Now, with bindless texturing, it kind of removes the need to have texture 2Ds arrays, but they still are a feature. So I'm implementing them now, and I might use them or check the performance. But having just a bindless indexed texture in a shader is more flexible because the textures can be different sizes, whereas a texture 2D array, they all have to be the same size. But I suppose there might be hardware benefits to how that texture is cached and sampled and so forth. So that's something to look into. So here again, I need to register this. This eventually, it's going to need another component, and we're setting a push constants are going to need another set of push constants. So we push a matrix, and then like other things, push a color for the colored shader. Cube map test pushes a cube map and a MIP, so it's kind of similar to the cube map, really. Well, I'm just pushing a small amount of data, which is going to be the texture, and that's not right, I'm just moving that there for reference. A texture and also some kind of data which we can animate, which could also be done through a different kind of an update function, potentially, where we get past the delta time to regulate the frame rate. So I need a few more components, and I need to register this one. So in the draw, no, it's in the test file. Do I have it? Oh, it's there. Test setup texture 2D array test. It's currently using the mesh debug render graph, so I need to add a new render graph, which is going to call that texture 2D array function. I'm going to have to also register an update function to animate it, and have a component. I think I added one. So previously I had these cube map components, we've got a texture index, a texture instance component, and animated. Maybe I'll just call this frame. Got a frame. Also need a delta though, so maybe just a little struct, animated texture. So making a little struct for an animated texture. Things might want a time component actually, generically. For the time being, I'm just going to do it like this. No, maybe not. Time component. So this is just any entity could have a time component to use that to like kind of accumulate and do other stuff. And then another component which is just pub_u32 of a frame. So the timer will increment, and then once it goes over a threshold, it'll increment the frame, and the timer can reset. So I need a few those components to be added to these entities. Texture. And I need to, oh no, I've got a texture instance. Oh no, that's the cubemap one. So I need a texture instance. It's going to be similar to that. Texture 2D array, billboard, cylindrical billboard, texture instance, which is the texture array, shader resource view index, and we need a time component, which is going to be a float starting at 0, and a frame, which is going to be also starting at 0. So that's all of the things that we need to render and animate. We need an update system, which is going to be update animated. Update animated textures. Maybe I should call this animation frame. Animated texture frame, just being a bit more explicit. So, because these things are used in the query, and use them generically, make them too generic, then it might become a bit messy. So animated texture frame, update animated textures, and we're using the old same render graph. So I need to add a render graph, which is going to use a shader which can sample from a 2D texture, not a 2D texture array. So let's have a look at source shaders. Debug, right? The cubemap debug actually, it's more of a test. And again, here I've got debug and test. Maybe they should all be test. Sort of some of the code's scattered around. It does need tidying up and organizing a bit more, but it's in reasonably good shape. The core engine's in decent shape, I think, but the kind of the plugin a bit, everything's a bit scattered. Maybe making things a bit clearer. I'm quite lazy. I have tendency just to bung more stuff in a file and not add new files. I don't like having tons of little files, but then having super big files can be annoying as well. So, um, yeah, for the time being, I'm just going to put it in here because it inherits from Texture 2D test. Texture 2D array test inherits from mesh debug. Well, it could inherit from cubemap debug because that has samplers and it has everything we need. We need to add vertex shader and a pixel shader for it. I believe that the cubemap test is passing through the information we need. These vertex shaders could also be combined. VS cubemap test, use material world index, push constants material, because they're almost identical. Mesh push constants material here, mesh push constants material. I mean, that one doesn't even use this, so I'm going to change this and make one shader. To be honest, they could all be combined. There was some issue previously with the amount of push constants that I was using. So right, so VS Mesh material is going to be one. See, and I'm even doing stuff like passing the normal through as the color. My input has that. My output isn't outputting. I don't need that anymore. So definitely need a sweep through. I was going to do that when I kind of got everything working and I can then consolidate it, tidy it up. I've been trying to just carve a path and make as much progress as possible. So VS Mesh material uses the different set of push constants, which also has texture indices. So this one has an index texture indices, and then there's a draw push constants which has color information in there, and these go in the same slot, but they're used by different shaders. So VS Mesh C buffer instance, VS billboard. I don't even think that's used anymore, so nope. I'm going to take that out and just keep this kind of as tidy as possible. That was an issue. So here you can kind of, when it builds a shader, it's looking at what things are in use, so you can kind of do this sort of void statement, and then that keeps the textures included in the debug output. Where does it go to? PS cubemap test. So say like cubemap test PS, we have the textures and the cubemaps included. If cubemaps aren't, if textures, they don't need to be included. but the correct descriptor layout isn't being generated. So that's something that also I should make a note of while I remember about it. I've actually done that now. Cubemaps do not create descriptor layout binding, and it might be the same for the texture array as well. So I'm going to put in PS texture 2D array test. That's going to include textures like that. I'm just going to call it input color. So that should be, the color is this purple normal, like Z pointing at you normal, like flat normal map. VS Mesh material, VS Mesh, UV gradient. So texture 2D array. This is wild, like you can have both of these, both on the same register. And I assume you can do the same here. I might run into trouble, but I only need one entry to be added to the descriptor set, and then these can alias that same descriptor table, which is blowing my mind, really. Because I wondered if you would have to have a heap and bind a heap which has your texture cubes, and a heap for your texture 2Ds, and a heap for your arrays, and a heap for your 3D textures, and so on. Sample states that are static in the descriptor layout can't be in an array, though, from what I've sort of investigated. So that sampler wrap linear is just a straight up one, and we could bind another sampler on another register. Also think I've got an NVIDIA GPU. It's only a 1060, so it's fairly old now, but I think it is quite forgiving of if you're doing stuff wrong, it'll just return you black and zeros, and you know, its undefined behavior is quite well defined. Where I know I have had issues in the past with AMD, or well, long ago it was ATI, where there would be a lot more driver issues and variations. So I think probably I'll have to test on the AMD, and I imagine maybe there'll be some stuff I'm doing wrong. Although the validation layer isn't complaining about anything, so that's always a good sign. So cubemap test, texture 2D array test. Probably they should be moved into test shader, but VS Mesh material. That's that one, VS Mesh material, VS Mesh material, cubemap test, I'm going to call it, because the rest of it is, and it's important to be consistent. And then so the pipeline's in one file, and then pipelines, cubemap test. Tell you what, I should be able to move this texture 2D array, test, cubemap test, mesh debug. The idea like the mesh debug would be around, and you could be able to turn it on and like look at the UVs and the normals and kind of use it as a reference thing. Like wireframe is useful as a debugging tool. And then you've got some variations of those CBUF, for instance, which they're a bit more test-like. So maybe I'll start just trying to make a bit more sense of all of this. And these are inheriting mesh debug anyway. So cubemap test inherits from mesh debug, PS mesh material, PS cubemap test. Texture 2D, that was PS texture 2D array test, and that inherits from cubemap. So raster test, blend test, cubemap test, and now texture 2D array test, which the test PMFX is sort of making sense now. I think it needs its own HLSL file, and then that kind of disambiguates it a little bit from debug. But for the time being, I'm going to do that. Cubemap test, texture 2D array test is going to use texture 2D array test pipeline. The pipeline is the same name as the render graph and render meshes function. Test render meshes pipeline, render texture 2D array. What did I call the cubemap one? Render meshes cubemap test. And there's all just may as well just call everything consistently with one another. Render meshes, texture 2D array test, texture 2D array test, and the pipelines are called texture 2D array test. Right, so if I save all, it's failed to compile the shaders. Missing shader entry point. DS mesh push constants material. What shaders using that? Debug. Mesh push constants material. Yes, mesh push constants material. I can't remember what it looked like before. I know. VS mesh push constants material. VS mesh. Did it become the same? It did. redo all of that and just change it. Technically, that should be the name of it. Because it is PS mesh push constants material. Yeah, material push constants. And then update that in the cubemap test. And then they share everything except the pixel shader. Still failing. Missing. Okay. Right, it's complete now. But it doesn't seem to have changed. Ah, okay, I know what it is now. So in what is it? Debug. Too many files. Right, so on texture 2D array, test texture 2D array. Which has a different naming convention to the shaders. There's too many bits to hook up. Mesh debug. What did I call it? Texture 2D array test is the render graph name. Okay, so now failing to compile, and there's a mismatch in types. Okay. Okay. Mesh query. World matrix and mesh. And we just draw it cylindrically, billboarding. Should use a different shader. Oh, it's crashed. This happens every time adding a new. It's a new pipeline. If I run it again, I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. And they should be not checkered, they'll just be solid color using the correct shader if it's worked. It's not worked. But so before the shaders fail to compile, then these are missing functions, so on. So the whole point is it doesn't crash. This crash is elusive, and at the point when I get it, I can never be bothered to debug it. But something to do with failing effects pipeline creates that, but I know what it. I think I might know what it is. Hmm. No, maybe not actually. Hmm. Down here. This has an unwrap, right? Or an expect. I'm just going to put an error, and then maybe it'll give me a bit more info. Flex folders pipeline name. Problem is, okay, yes. So when we open the file in the load function, it goes through and it finds all the pipelines, and then it inserts the name in there, and it has a lookup. So it knows the pipe. Instead of the pipeline, they're structured as so. In data, we have shaders, and then we have the PMFX file called test, and then we have the pipeline called whatever the name is, and then so in terms of tests, we have texture 2D array test, and it needs to know to look inside this file, look inside this metadata for the shaders, and load your shader from inside here. So I think what's happening is it's not tracking that on a reload. It's only tracking it on the initial load. So on a reload, we do a merge PMFX file. Pipelines. Okay. So other pipelines keys name PMFX folders. File path. I don't know if we have a file path or the correct file path when merging. The other one is a PMFX file. Come on. Reload file path. So that's other file path, and I believe I can now just do away with it's a string. Merge PMFX. And I can just do that, and I don't need to do this anymore. So I'm going to close that, and if this works, then oops, message and still. That's going to be the equivalent. Okay. Borrow check. Okay, this can go first. Borrow checker. It's a cruel mistress sometimes. Come on. Building plugins. Right. It's not crashing. Geometry primitives are working and everything else. Which means moving that code. Do we only have the one location? What is it? Well, that's nice. It only has one place where we add this. So then if we go down to test texture 2D array, still missing update animated textures and render meshes texture 2D array test. It's a mouthful. The reason for that is they've not been put in, and this is the bane of my life at the moment. Not only do I have to make a function, I've got to do this. Wasn't even registered anyway. Render meshes. So I've got to do all this nonsense. Firstly, so I can. This is kind of working a bit against Bevy ECS, but it's necessary to make it possible to locate these functions somehow by name. Might think of some better ways to do this, but for the time being it's fine. I did the setup function, but I didn't have the render, so that's that. And then the most annoying part of it is you have to copy the sort of function args, because this goes into a closure and it can handle errors and it can pass you the view and it can begin the render pass, but it makes it a bit tricky. Update functions, you only have to just register them. They don't care what their signature is, so that they are significantly better. And if it was all like that, I'd be happy. With render functions, you have to supply also a tuple of queries just to make it easier. The I could change this. Bevy has this thing into descriptor, which is what all of these can kind of return. I won't go into it now, but this is becoming, it's not too much work, but it's just an extra step, and shortly I'm going to want to add more functions. I think this might work. I just compile, it's going to render them, but it's not going to update them, which I haven't done any code. I don't think I've actually even implemented this function. Right, cool. So it's blue now, which I said it was going to be purple like a normal map, or I don't know, sort of bluey purple, but the color is actually blue because this is the Z, positive Z normal, and positive Z normal is looking at the screen. Is it right-handed? I don't know which way around it is. This one, right? I think it's this one. Right-handed coordinate system. That's just what I always use. I got some old code which is doing that as well, so this is perfect. Missing update function, and we're not sampling the texture, but the shader, I should be able to sample the texture fairly quickly and pass data to it and get a single frame, and then I'll be able to bring it to life by animating the frame value, which should be as fun as you can possibly imagine. Right, so push constants. Render meshes pipeline. Not using that. What was this one? Right, so we push some push constants the same way. They're on slot 1. This was the cubemaps one. We don't want that. So instead of MIP, it's going to be the frame of animation, and texture instance is what we need to have. So in this scenario, if I could just go, oh, I'm going to add a texture instance, and that was it, that'd be cool. But I've got to add it here, and I've also got to add it down here. And while I'm here, I may as well add the other one. What is it? It's called a animated texture frame. May as well. Oh, the Rust analyzer broken. Okay, here it is. We've got that texture instance. So now we've got texture, and we're going to have frame. Right, so texture is just going to be passed in like that, and frame is also going to be passed in like that. Frame and texture are both going to be 0, and this should just compile. Nothing's going to change. I need to update the shader. It's built. While I'm doing this, I'm going to just, oh, wrong. Window had focus. Right, ETS demos tests. Scale. So scale, I know this texture is kind of, it's non-power of 2 and it's non-square. So I'm going to want a non-square scale. And then position. That's 0 to 1. I'm just going to move the YPOS so they're kind of I'm just going to go let size equals vec2f. But for the time being, they're currently at 10. Move them up by half height, which should mean the bottoms of the quads are touching the grid floor. That's not. That's not what I expected. Scale is of 10. Equals size dot y. So those fail. Oh. Pos dot y equals size dot. What are you on about? The billboard quad. Hold on, it's plus size. So the reason that it's not half size is the quad dimension goes from -1 to 1, scaling by size. So yeah, those ones now look perfectly aligned to the ground. And then I don't know if let's get the texture working now. Debug shader. So float 4 col equals texture 2D arrays at texture indices dot x sample layer, is it? What is it called? Direct3D12 sample, no, HLSL sample texture 2D array layer. We just do sample and it takes a float 3. I'm not sampling a level. Sample a wrap linear input dot export. I actually have some other code from an older code base, which, well, the older version of EMFX shader has all these macros, so to make it kind of cross-platform. I'm just going to double check on there. This one's quite fiddly, and the different platforms sometimes take multiple parameters. Yeah, so I'm going to set an array level. Or an array takes a float 3 with the array index in the third component, whereas I think in Metal you pass in a float, like float 2 for the texture coords, and then an int to index into the array. Open path Metal. Just interested in the different conventions. Sometimes it's useful. Texture 2D array. Well, that's the definition. Sample texture array. Name sample. Yeah, see, it takes like texture dot sample a name, that's a macro, text coord as a text2, and then it has to cast the array into a uint. So but because of that being quite different, it confuses me. What should I do here? These are a bit sample level. Sample get on the next line. Input text code XY and texture indices Y is the frame. And this is going to map automatically. It's crashed. Damn. One day I'll get a clean run. And I'll be able to keep the client running. I'll be able to add stuff and it won't crash. Hopefully next time adding a new pipeline shouldn't crash it. So yeah, here we go. This is overlapping, which is fine. I'm going to comment out. So cubemap does not populate. I take out textures. I think this is going to work. What I was talking about earlier. I've got three things which alias the same slot. The shader compiler system is trying to work out what it needs, and cubemaps are having no effect on that. But texture 2D arrays, I think, is having an effect on that. And so now I've got two bindings when actually I only want one. In theory, right, okay. So now it's not crashing. But I'm not assigning the texture. Come on. Let's go. Oh, crashing, come on. Where did that happen? Sampling an out of bounds texture, maybe? No, it's black now. Weird. Right, so I'm going to have to go into debug mode now. Or, the other thing is this is the first texture 2D array. I haven't actually seen a texture 2D array yet. Debug console. There's nothing. No errors. Right. Render doc. My old friend. Let's go and get a clean render doc. Is it render doc, my old friend, or hello darkness, my old friend, if you're having to boot it up? Right, let's grab a frame. So this is similar to yesterday. I had black spheres, no textures. Texture viewers, inputs, texture 2D arrays. Outputs. So texture 2D arrays are inputs, but it doesn't seem to be. Resource. I don't even know what I'm looking at here. Confusing. The inputs is just nothing. Black. inputs. Really should do with them. I've put some labels on some of these, but I need a bit more work to be able to label all of the different kinds of resources. Let's double check that shader. Maybe, oh, I know what it might be. I might not be binding a heap. So, yep. Set render heap. It's going to help if you bind the textures first. So the device shader heap, mentioned that before. You just create a texture with the device. Don't worry about heaps, or you can supply your own heaps if you want. I think that gives maximum flexibility. And for these examples, I've only got a small number of textures, so it's fine. Okay, cool. Here he is, upside down. So that's something. Upside down. I think I want blending. I want to blend him with alpha, and I don't want to set his alpha to 1. Get rid of textures in there. Where's that? Create a shader on file. Well, it's an option. It's a little bit confusing. The shader. Oh, it's a result. Yes, okay, that can do that. You don't need to unwrap and then at least this is handling something. Parent is an option. Yeah, is an option. They need to be unwrapped, which is error compiling shader. So the whole idea of this is that it doesn't crash and that you just stay running in the client, but not quite there yet. So I'm passing through alpha, and now we're going to pipeline. I already have some blending. Just want blend alpha, or do I want discard? Maybe just discard in the shader actually, because I don't have to worry about depth sorting. And that might give me a shout to test alpha to coverage as well. And hold up doing Rust style. The threshold 0.1. And then is it discard? Does discard take parameters? No. Reload from compiling shader. Right, so the errors bubbled up to here. compiling shaded tests, PS texture array, unwrap. Not seen this one before. Now it seems like any time I modify the shader. Okay, but there they are. Now fairly nicely cut out. So all of the UVs seem like they need flipping. For the time being, I'm just going to do it in the shader. And then I'm going to sort out my geometry so there's no flipping necessary. 2 TC equals do it in a one. This might crash now. I wonder. Yeah, that's every time now. So the reload's happening. Reloads the shader. It's just looking in test and not in data shaders test. Compiling shader. I think it's to do with the merging code that I changed before. The other crash. So insert other file path, merge PMFX, so reload file path. I'm just going to do a quick guard against this. Self dot, if it contains the key, then it's already containing the key. And then it kicks the can down the road for another day. Damn. Right, let me double check now. Wrong. Right, okay, there we go. It's not crashing now, at least. I think it's still, what's going to happen is a new pipeline comes along and that'll crash, but that's fine. Maybe be a bit more aggressive. Okay. And then, okay, now flip the text chords. Cool. Now they're the right way around. No, they're the right way around. Just want to animate them and make sure they're the right aspect ratio. So that's something to check. Annoying. Where's that? What is it? No. Random cylindrical billboards. So texture array. I'm in this stupid configuration where the Rust Analyzer isn't working in the plugins. That is something to fix, and it means I'm going to have to go back to the source code. So I was wondering, there is a function I can call and you can get the texture size. Nope. Clone inner is resolvable. So, I'm calling this get texture from load texture from file function. I can do something different to get texture array info, because image just load from file. This is a bit cramped. I think this has an error as well. Right, so this just loads a texture info, and then the function's actually fairly straightforward in that. Texture array info. There's an info and a data. And then by doing this, I have access to the texture array info. I'm going to say make these a little bit bigger. By 20, and then work out the aspect ratio by doing width divided by height. Width divided by height, and then we multiply by aspect. Move that there because that's all sort of texture related. Oops. What's this texture array? Okay, this one is also an error. Annoying. This is some texture array info with info dot height. Now what's the problem? For God's sake. What's this then? As an F32 and more errors. Tedious. fine. This can be some. At this point, it's easier. Oh, more errors. So annoying. Do you know what? I don't like having to do this. I would like to be able to write code without having to keep checking as slice. Changes building. Whew. Come on, was that it? Doesn't seem like it's changed. Ah, my size is not being used as my scale. So one in this in a Z. Oh, weird. XXY. Sort of non-uniform scaling. Right, that's all right. Here we go. They're not touching the floor though. Why? Oh, it's because he has alpha around him. So this is just going to have to be a manual hard-coded hack. So 0.8. This is what the hot reload is for, when you get your money's worth. Tweaking a value. It needs to move down more. Or up less. I could work it out by it kind of looks alright. That's in the rough ballpark, right? So now animation function. Whole rigmarole. There's not many updates. Lib rs ECS demos so far. Update rotate meshes. I'm going to move this into the test alongside, although it is fairly generic sounding. Update animated textures. I'm going to call it animate textures because it's just called rotate meshes. So it's something that has an animated texture frame and a time component. We get given a time resource. Animate textures, and that just has to be registered. So as I was mentioning before, registering an update function is actually quite easy. You just have to do the wanna, and I think that'd be fairly easy. I think probably all of this will be possible to derive them. I just haven't really dug into that too much yet with the proc macro. So animate textures, animate textures. Well, that's still going to be missing because it needs to be updated in the init function, animate textures. Oh, got a D on it by accident. This is annoying. Coplanar randomizing. Need a better distribution. That's driving me mad as well. Okay. So no complaints. Simply need to now go in here and implement the animation. So animate texture frame wants to be mutable. Time component wants to be mutable. For mut, mut frame and mut timer equals mesh. Animated texture query. Timer plus equals time I'm going to put in smooth delta, time.0.smooth delta, or delta. I'll do delta, the other one is. Right, and then if timer becomes greater than how many frames a second, I could calculate that once. Right, so 1 divided by 24 frames a second. We reset the timer, and then in mut animated texture query. So if we accumulate the time until it's 24 frames a second, and then reset that back to 0, and then increment the frame plus 1. Damn, animated texture frame. How many frames are there? That needs to be passed in. And all of these new types are annoying. Timer.0, frame.0, frame.0 plus 1 plus equals 1. But it needs to wrap. I know it was more than 10 frames, so animated texture query not found in this scope. What are you talking about? What mesh query, mesh animated texture? It's this, annoyingly. Bills failed. Tiring. With the trait read only query. So I want it to be a mut query. The trait found, time prevent, read only query. Tiring, this is. Build fail, could not come. Oh my god, annoying. I'm actually raging now. Why? Read only world query. Not satisfied. I don't understand. So I've got some other queries. This is where it's boring, you know, watching someone fix complicated errors. Draw.rs. Right. This has some what's query, draw index. No. I think that unmod time component. Hold on. I'm going to open the plugins separately. Back one, and then okay, this one now this is telling me is this a end? No. Like time component is just this, a float inside a thing. Like, why is this so complicated? Batch. Oh my god. Very annoying. This one. This is a mut. and then it has a mut instance buffer. It was going so smoothly until this happened. Right. Time component as a reference. Read-only query is not satisfied. But why is animated texture frame? Annoying. I don't want to have to search for things. I don't want it to be read-only though. Like it's actually, you know, it's mutating it. Like everything is mutable. It's fucking pissing me off now. Very annoying. Or mut frame in. I don't even know. That's mut. Animate texture query. Can we do this? It doesn't like that. It has to be a mutable reference. Frame equals frame plus 1. On a sync, right? So I don't understand really how this doesn't work. One of the problems with Berry is it's quite complicated with the generics and all the kind of magic it's doing. We can't take that. We can't take it. Mut, right? Okay. And so these errors are just very confusing to follow and understand what they even mean. Right, so look, it's going fast. It's working. That's some kind of animation. But now I can't add a float. Like, it's the same kind of thing. You're kidding me. World query, read-only world query. Why? Is it we can only do one, mutate one thing at a time? Ah, I know what it is. Damn. So this is a tuple inside. Easy. to do, hard to figure out. And that is mort plus 1. Oh, frame shouldn't be that. Frame is a... animated texture frame. Right, that one's really something to pay attention to. Make sure it's a tuple. And then it takes a mutable query and then a read-only query in the other side. And they can be tuples of anything. Okay, so animated texture now. To just wrap this off. Let's see if we can do it with the client running. Test. Okay, he's moving at a better rate now. Animated texture, it's not going to be just texture frame. It's going to be animated texture, and it's going to be a struct. It's going to contain the frame. U32 and count can also be U32. That's fine. Containing animated texture frame. Frame is 0. Frame count is in the info. Array layers. Get rid of that. That's fine. What's it complaining about now? More. Mental errors. Right. Animated textures. Animated texture. Animated texture. So texture instance. So animated texture dot frame. Animated texture. We can do percent by animated texture dot frame count. It's going to be errors. It's going okay. Now we should see it going to the full anim, and then the final thing, I'm just gonna offset and then law this as a U32. So then I'll go slightly out of sync. Okay. Cool. Oh god, that was an ordeal in the end. That can happen with you sometimes. Anyway, texture array working, animating. Just gonna do a little screenshot of that to send my friend who made the original asset. Cubemap working. To-do list. The next things on the list. Oh, I'm not in the right thing. Anyway, carry on with material. Basically, now I've got more kind of textures and a bit more insight into different types of resources and how they're going to be used. So yeah. Anyway, that was it. A bit stressful to the end, but it was all right.